Almighty God in heaven, we thank you for the privilege of working in your vineyard. And we just pray that your Holy Spirit be with us today, that we may do a perfect work for you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so I'm used to quite an interactive class. Maybe I'll ask questions, but make sure you do just shout out, interrupt. If you have any questions or if you want me to repeat anything. Okay. So I was presenting November 5th as the date for the Sunday law, but I dropped that a month ago, just over a month ago. So I don't believe November 5th anymore. And I do believe July 18th, after a little bit of backwards and forwards in my mind and everything. Just by way of explanation, after Elder Terry spoke in France, is it 11th of February, something like that? She said a couple of things which I thought, oh dear, that collapses November 5th. We'll probably get into that a bit later on, if you want to. So I thought, okay, the only real option is July 18th. So I presented in Australia next, and I said I'm on board July 18th. Then I started, as you do, the days go by, you start to study, look into the questions and everything. And I started thinking, I'm not too sure now. So by the time we get to, I think it was last week, when I presented to South America, someone nailed it down and they said, tell us what date you believe. And I said, I'm not too sure. I'm kind of in between November 5th and July 18th. But since then, I've had all my questions answered. So I think I'm fully and finally on board July 18th. So July 18th, I've got that on the board as the National Sunday law. Okay, so what I thought I'd do today is present something that Elder Terry has already presented in Fiji a couple of months ago. And if you remember, she did the 3 Romes. Okay, so it was an old study from a long time ago, way back in the beginning, that Elder Jeff did. Elder Jeff pioneered or whatever. And she compared and contrasted pagan Rome with papal Rome and then with modern Rome. I haven't put papal Rome up here because we haven't made any application of that. But this whole study is to do with Rome conquers 3 geographic territories until it rules the world supremely, before it rules the world supremely. And so the papal Rome is the Ostrogoths, the Heruli, the Vandals, that one. But we haven't made any application of those tribes or that story. So for Rome, I've left that line out. And I've put pagan Rome and I've put modern Rome because that's what the study is called. But we know modern Rome has nothing to do with end time events, apart from it being the counterfeit church. But I mean politically, socially, there's no Jesuits sneaking around or anything like that. So I've also put King of the North. Okay, I think that's probably more accurate. Okay, any questions before I actually start? Quick introduction. Okay, so I'll just run through what's already on the board. If you go to Daniel 8:9, you'll find the 3 geographic areas that pagan Rome conquered before they ruled the world. In the words of Daniel 8:9, it was the east in 64 BC, that was Syria, and then the pleasant land, which is the glorious land. And you can see why that lines up with the National Sunday law in the US. The pleasant land, the glorious land in 63 BC. And then in 31 BC, Battle of Actium, all of that. Pagan Rome takes the south, in the words of Daniel 8:9, which is Egypt. And then it rules for a time till 330 AD. And then with the King of the North in our time, Elder Jeff always taught that first Rome takes Russia, the USSR, then enters into the Glorious Land, and then in the model of Ellen White, that 1888 model, Sunday law is first passed in America, and then it goes country by country around the world till we've got the world is taken by what we used to say was Rome. Now we'll say the King of the North. And then at Daniel 12:1, America begins to rule the world. Elder Jeff always said, rules the world supremely. So until the second advent. Okay. Any questions? Any thoughts? Will I check? Okay, so way back in the day, Time of the End magazine, etc., Elder Jeff taught that the King of the South, Russia, Soviet Union, was conquered, killed, if you like, back here at the end of the Cold War. So 1989, and then 1991, the Soviet Union collapses. So Elder Jeff would teach that that was the death of the King of the South. And he didn't ever think Russia would be another prophetic actor. So he always taught that that would be the complete death of the King of the South, the complete and final death. Then Elder Tess comes along and begins her ministry. And she says, actually, this history is going to repeat. And from Panium until National Sunday Law, the King of the South is going to receive a deadly wound again, just like 1989, and then a death in 1990, and then the death in 1991 would be at Sunday Law. So Elder Tess says that's not actually the complete and final death of the King of the South. It resurrects, if you like. And then there's another death of the King of the South at the Sunday Law. And Elder Tess taught that that would be the complete and final death of the King of the South. Okay, any thoughts so far? Okay, so what I want to do now, what I want to do now is compare and contrast to the King of the North. So at this way, Mark, the National Sunday Law, Daniel 11:41 says, and the King of the North shall enter also into the glorious land. Okay, so now we teach that the King of the North, I'm going to say it this way for now, I'm going to say the King of the North is America. Okay, I know we're saying it's just the Republican Party, but for the purposes of the point I want to make now, I'm going to say the King of the North is America and the glorious land is America. So how does the United States enter also into the United States. And of course, in the words of Elder Tess, she would call that civil war, or revolution, counter-revolution, or maybe war on the Western Front. Okay, so in other words, it's an internal struggle. And the King of the North wins or conquers the glorious land. So I'm going to put here that Sunday law, there's an internal victory for the King of the North. Does that make sense so far?
Hi, Aaron.
Yeah.
Quick question. When you say the glorious land and sorry, when you say the civil war that's taking place between the King of the North and the opposition, who's the opposition in that civil war? You're saying it's the glorious land? Because there's also this sixth kingdom. Like, could you clarify the dynamics between sixth, seventh, and the glorious land? And who's who in that triangle? Does my question make sense?
No. You to ask difficult questions. So first of all, maybe if you're already thinking something, or can anyone else
No,
answer?
it's a genuine question, not with anything in my mind.
Because we've changed the model very recently. And so we used to say the sixth kingdom was America, and then the seventh kingdom was America dictating over the UN. Now we're saying the seventh kingdom is just the Republican Party, and the King of the North is just the Republican Party. So that's the reason for your question, because things have changed now, I'm guessing. So you're saying who would be the glorious land? It sounds to me like it would be the sixth kingdom in the model we've got at the moment.
So glorious land equals sixth kingdom in how you understand it.
I'm not sure. That's a bit of a guess. I'm going to say my best guess, but it's not a good one. Can I ask anyone else that's here at the moment, what do they think? Even if you can't answer, just if you have any thoughts to build on. Anyone? Trust Curtis. Okay.
Okay, carry on. And we can continue dialoguing.
The other thing is, okay. The other thing is there's anomalies that still need to be answered with this new model. So maybe that's one of them. But I think for now, I'll put my bet on the sixth kingdom, and we'll see who wins the bet.
Okay.
Aaron, can I ask a question? It's going back. It's not about what was just discussed. If you could move to your left a teeny bit. So, not that far. You said something about 1989, 1991. I think a wound and a death. It says death of the King of the South. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you said something that Elder Tess taught that it's going to get repeated.
Yes.
And where did you mark 89 and 91?
So, because we don't have 2001 on this, I didn't put the waymarks in. Let me do it in a different color. Lines. So on the line of the 144,000, that would be 2001. And 2021 is Panium, the formalization. And so Panium would have been the deadly wound, and National Sunday Law would have been the death. Does that make sense?
And why is it 2021?
because in October of 2021, the information war part.
I meant prophetically, not literally.
Don't know what you mean. Sorry. What do you mean?
2021 is Panium. Why would it be? Why is Panium marked as 1989?
Oh, deadly wound. So the King of the South loses the information war here to the King of the North, Panium,
Back in some history.
in 2021, October, November, December.
Panium's a historical thing,
Oh,
battle. Well, would Panium be marked as the wound of the King of the South?
yes.
Okay, historically.
Oh, it was just the only thing I remember is that it was a win for the King of the North. I don't know if, and it was a win with elephants and elephants at information war.
But we would then say that
Oh,
would
deadly
be
wound.
a wound, not a death, because
Yeah.
because it's not the Sunday law.
So all I'm thinking is it's actually Beneventum with Pyrrhus, not Panium.
Yeah.
At Beneventum, Pyrrhus loses, if you want to see that as a deadly wound, because he's been
Okay.
winning so. And then in Argos, the next battle, Sunday law, is when he actually dies. So I think it does fit.
Okay. I wouldn't
yeah.
say. I just clarify. A second question. Say back in, I don't know, 2005 to 2015, that 10-year history, just randomly. We knew that Russia was doing things. Did we think Russia was dead, or did we think Russia had resurrected or was alive? Because you said Test developed this idea from 21 to 24 that it was going to die again, repeating of 1891. Before Test ever taught, what was the movement's concept of Putin? Because we knew he was alive and kicking, and Crimea is 14, I think.
Yes.
Did we have some kind of notion that actually this is a dead person walking or he's resurrected without Tess clarifying that?
So tested this in 2019.
Yeah.
And I remember being in Court Henry with Debbie at lunch, sitting opposite talking. And it was 2014 and Crimea, Russia. And Debbie said, "This is definitely prophetic." And I said, "No, it's not, because Russia's dead. It's no longer an actor, prophetic actor." And so, like, I was talking to you a lot and talking to Jeff a lot. So I think we just thought, yeah, complete death. And anything that's happening is just not important. Say, like, same as China or something like that. So, Debbie, you were right. Sorry. I think Debbie's here today. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any other thoughts with anyone? Russia did 1989. Juicy idea. 1989. Ah,
Can you read that out, the message that you're reading?
that reminds me of something. Yeah. So that's a good. We used to teach Russia dead in 1989. It was Chawatu that then introduced the idea that 1989 was to the borders, not dead. Oh yeah. Now what was all that about?
Question about.
Go on.
I just wanted to ask, did he introduce that, if I remember correctly, in the context of the studies he was doing in 2016 about when he went into Daniel 11 and Raphia, Panium, etc. He was trying to make that point.
Yeah,
That was the, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
he did. Way back, I remember talking to Elder Jeff and Pimenta, and I mentioned, when you look at the history, Egypt was taken twice. It was taken by Pompey and then Julius Caesar. Actually, a third time when Antony, dies in 31. And it was just kind of like, no, don't worry about it. And then when Chowder then did his history, how we got the King of the South, King of the North, and he brought the idea that actually in 1989, like it was in history, the king of the south was taken to the borders and wasn't completely destroyed. So now Putin, or the king of the south, has to be completely overthrown, as it was in history. 1989 was to the borders, and I think as a movement we then accepted that history and that application of memory.
Aaron?
Yes. Your memory's better than mine, but I remember something like that. I remember the borders. And obviously, if you're going to look at Raphia and Panium, it's between the King of the North and the King of the South. And we placed Raphia and Panium in the future to 2016. So we must have then known, actually, that Russia is still a competitive factor.
Aaron, if I'm not mistaken, I think the difference between what was taught in 2016 by Chao Tu and Kimberly and what Elder Tess taught was that they said it wasn't dead, as Manjit was saying, you know, it only came to the borders. But then Elder Tess was no, it was Russia was actually dead, and it resurrected.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened, if I'm not wrong.
I think so too. Now you say it, you've all got good memories. Okay. Anything else from anyone?
Can you remember what that battle was? Where that was it actually Panium? Anybody remember what that battle was? Where Egypt came to the border and then they didn't enter Egypt, and there was something about up to the neck as well. We taught that too, and I was trying to find. I think that's a Bible verse, but they went up to the neck, but they didn't come for the head in that sense. So there was that concept. I thought he'd got it from Daniel 11, the wording, but neck isn't Daniel 11. Yeah, rusty history. Sorry.
I can't answer that one. Which
Okay.
battle?
I was wondering if Magic remembered what that battle was he talked about when he just went to
No,
the
I think it was the history. It was the history. When he went to the history, it was to the borders, not completely destroyed. I don't think you actually see that in Daniel 11
okay.
itself. Yeah, that's off memory.
I remember he was studying a lot of the book of Maccabees, and a lot of information he got from that book. I think there was 2 books. He was like really like studying. So a lot of that information he got from some battles from the book of Maccabees, and he made application.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Shout out any thoughts. Okay, so I'm at compare and contrast King of the South with the King of the North. And the King of the North has an internal victory at the National Sunday. And then, as I say, we've taught, in fact, it's just Adventism. So Adventism believes, Ellen White said, that in the 1888 literal Sunday law model, the national Sunday law is passed in the US, and then it spreads. It goes around the world, country by country, until Daniel 12:1. We used to call it the Universal Sunday Law, or we tend to call it now the Worldwide Sunday. And that's some of the logic as to why that's Daniel 12:1. Because once everyone's been tested, then nothing left to do. Let's just close the show, close of probation at that point there. And you can get some of those references from Last Day Events 135. Okay. So this was called an internal victory for the King of the North because it was inside the US. And these are the countries outside of the US. So when the final country is conquered, I'm going to call that the external victory for the King of the North. And that would be a complete and final victory as well. So you've got this. External. So internal inside the US, external outside the US. And this would
Hi,
be,
Aaron.
yes.
Yes. I'm sorry. I could you explain why we mark? I think I'm a bit behind. Why we mark the World Sunday Law at the same way mark that we put Daniel 12, verse 1. So, according to my understanding of the text, Daniel 12, verse 1 is when Michael stands, and there will be time of trouble such as never was. And when you read the text in Great Controversy, it explains the time of trouble as the 7 last plagues, which is the close of probation for humanity. So I do not understand why we place a parallel between Daniel 12 verse 1 fulfillment and World Sunday Law. If you're able to explain to me briefly.
Simply, if the Sunday law is the test, the great test for all of humanity, then in that 1888 model, when the Sunday law is passed in the United States, that would just only test the people of the United States. And then when it moves to France and Germany and whatever, moves around the world, the people of each country are being tested. Once you've covered every country in the world, everyone's been tested in the world. So what more is there to do? Testing time is over. In other words, probation is over, because probation is a testing time. So may as well close probation because there's no more test. Does that make sense?
Okay, so the Sunday law will be swelling from if we say July 18 is this National Sunday Law, of which I concur with you on that one. It begins to swell until it gets to 12 verse 1. And then we call 12 verse 1 the National Sunday Law, in that it is the close of probation for the world. Everyone has been tested.
Yes,
Yes.
I think so. That would be the universal Sunday law, the worldwide Sunday law. I seem to
Okay.
remember we said, because when the Sunday law, again, old model, is passed in America, first of all, it starts out with no teeth. And then the pressure builds as time goes on inside America. There's, fines, then imprisonment, then eventually things like torture and death decree. So you mentioned the word swells. As the pressure swells, while the loud cry is also swelling, outside of America, it's also swelling, if you like, or expanding or whatever. So I think it was like, that's how we used to think of it.
All right. Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, Aaron, if thinking about that point, and thinking about how Elder Jeff developed that model of national Sunday law and global Sunday law, we don't really think that, or now we don't really think that the national Sunday law is the close operation for the US. So I think he based, as you were saying, he kind of based his argument on that, but we changed our mind, or did we? So if we did, then the argument to develop that model was wrong. It doesn't mean the conclusion is wrong, but at least the argument. I don't know if that makes sense.
So you used to say the Sunday law is the close of probation for America, you're saying, for the US.
Well, that's yeah, and that's what you said, right? Like when you explained how we came up with that model.
There's been so many changes in such a short time recently. I can't get my head around, because you're right, because we've always said shipwreck, and one of the ships is the US. That's Sunday law. We also said mark of the beast test, that's Sunday law. Things like that. Shut door for Laodicea, that's Sunday law. So with the changes we've made, I'm wondering if other things have to get changed as well. So
Yeah.
that makes sense, yeah. Difficult
Sorry
questions at
about it.
6:30 in the morning, honestly.
Sorry about that.
Okay, there's another, I don't know, but probably, yeah, things will, it'll probably end up being that way, yeah. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So you can see this compare and contrast is starting to break down a bit. You have the complete death of the king of the south here, but you have the complete victory for the king of the north here. So it's not really working out very well. Okay, so you have the internal victory for the king of the north at National Sunday Law. You have the external victory for the king of the north at Daniel 12, or worldwide Sunday. So with compare and contrast parallel methodology, you would think then that there's an internal death for the king of the south, as well as an external. And that's nothing new. So Elder Terry has already said the internal death for the king of the south at the National Sunday Law is Navalny. I'll put that on the board in a second. And Navalny died or was murdered February 2024. Okay? So it fits quite nicely. So let me do that. So instead of saying this is the complete death of the south, as Elder Test taught, I'm going to say this is the internal. Navalny, okay, which would be the death of Navalny. So an internal death for the King of the South isn't anything new. It's an established truth for a while, around about 2019. It's just that no application was ever made before Elder Terry made that application, and it hadn't been revisited until she did so. I seem to remember in 2019, Elder Parminder saying that the King of the North just says to the King of the South, "Hey, King of the South, here's a sword. Why don't you kill yourself?" And the King of the South says, "Okay, then." I couldn't find the clip. Do you remember that, Elder Parminder, or you don't remember? Remember
Actually,
even saying
I do remember saying that, funnily enough. I don't remember when or where.
I seem to remember I was living in Spain, so that would be 2019. So,
Do you remember the context?
yeah, it was to do with the papacy doesn't have an army, and Elder Parminder was saying, what's the name of the guards in the Vatican with the furry hats and the flowers and ceremonial guards?
Swiss guard?
Swiss Guard. He's saying, do you really think the Swiss Guard are going to invade America, invade the United States, or something like that? And then he says, no, the King of the South kills itself. The King of the North says, here's a sword, and all of that. So you could always search for Swiss Guard or something like that if you're looking for it. Okay.
Aaron,
Yes,
can I ask something about the death of the King of the South?
please.
So I understand the parallel and the comparison, but about saying that Navalny is the internal death of the King of the South, well, I'm gonna say you or Elder Terry or whatever, saying that Navalny is the King of the South and it dies, or that the death of Navalny causes the death of Putin or something like that.
I think the second one, the latter one. I
Okay.
think that, and we have to see how it plays out. But that would be bad for Putin. The death of Navalny, bad for Putin. I'm assuming something like he was the head of the opposition, and so he must have had a good amount of support inside Russia. And one day this will come back to haunt Putin or something like that. I don't know. I'm not too sure.
Because
Does that make
from
sense?
what I was reading, it hasn't had much impact yet, at least.
Yeah, I
So
know. We're a year on now as well.
yeah,
So,
so like, how do we, if it hasn't had much impact, and we don't we don't put it there because we see the impact or anything. Why do we? Is it like a guess that in the future is going to cause an impact, or is it just because of the parallel and we say, oh, here's a death and it would fit?
so I'm thinking the same as you. I can't see it right now.
Okay.
So I'm thinking if it is correct, when we'll see it take effect at some time in the future. But it's been a year and it doesn't seem to be bothering the Russian people as far as we know, or Putin or anything. So I don't know. I'm just basically reproducing what Elder Terry taught.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? So Elder Terry now has made application of the suicide or the internal death of the King of the South. And Elder Tess also, as well as Elder Parminder, talked about this, and just in a historic factual way, talking about glasnost, perestroika, and the internal protests in the Soviet bloc, which led to the final complete death of the King of the South in 1991, the Soviet Union. So if we're going to repeat history, there should be an internal death of the King of the South, then followed by an external death of the King of the South, at the same way mark. So internal, inside Russia, external would be outside Russia. So what would that be? What theatre would the external death of the King of the South be over? Anyone? What external theatre outside of Russia would be the death of the King of the South? You know, Simon?
I have a thought.
Go ahead.
So when we think of what makes what this battle of the King of the North and the King of the South was over, it was over being a superpower. And so in 1989, George Bush is like New World Order, and he says it's within a specific context. But the premise of that is that now that the USSR is dead, it's a unipolar world. There's only one big dog on the show. And so this fight has been for recognition, I think, that the King of the South gets recognized as an equal with the King of the North, if not an equal, then above, but I'll say equal in terms of superpowers. And so when the King of the North defeats the King of the South and says, you sit down in your place, you're not an equal with me, and it takes over the world. So at the Daniel 12:1, where you've marked it, as being ruling over the world, it showed that it rules the glorious land. In at Daniel 12:1, it shows that it rules the world. It's that, I think, where you're going. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Like saying to Putin, yeah, you can't rival me. There's no equal superpowers. It's me and everyone else is subservient to me. So that being the marker for the death of the King of the South. The death of the King of the South is the death to its mission as wanting to be a superpower, I think.
Okay. I think I can agree with that. We're in this history now, which means we're in or approaching what you call the agitation for the worldwide Sunday law, or the external and complete death of the King of the South. So how is Trump now, as far as we can, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but if we look at what's happening now, how is Trump exercising power over Putin outside, in an event outside of Russia?
Sorry, Aaron, I know you just asked a question. I just want to go back to internal. Could you just explain the logic, the argument, the patterns that we have to show why we are expecting an internal death of the King of the South at the Sunday law? Could you just repeat what you said before? I didn't catch all the points clearly.
Okay, so the concept of an internal death of the King of the South isn't anything new, because we witnessed it back during the Cold War. That's you and Tess, yeah. So that's not new. The concept of an internal victory for the King of the North is just written into Daniel 11:41, the way we interpret it now. So, what was your question? What was the actual question?
I guess the question was what history or what models we're using to say that we expect an internal death there.
Okay, so repeats of history, because it happened at the end of the Cold War, and then compare and contrast the King of the South to the King of the North. You get an internal victory for the King of the North here. So you have to have some kind of defeat, internal defeat for the King of the South at the same way, Mark. I think that's it.
Okay.
It's the repeats of history and compare and contrast. Must be.
And you pointed to 1989. Is 91 the same thing?
1989 was the fall of the Berlin Wall.
It's just that earlier you said 1989 is 2021, I think.
Yes, true. So the fall of the Berlin Wall would be paralleling with the information war at the beginning of the Ukraine war, the deadly wound. So 1989 would be the deadly wound. And then the death would be 1991 when the Soviet Union collapses.
And that's like an internal collapse because no power is doing anything. Is that the logic for that?
The internal collapse in 1989.
In 91. In 91.
Oh, I think 91 would have to be external, wouldn't it? Because you get internal first, then external. So if you're going to bring that to here, the internal comes first, which would demand 1989. The external would have to be 1991. And I remember in one of my recent presentations to whichever ministry, I started to go there and I stopped myself because I wasn't really sure it works. Because 1989 isn't inside Russia, is it? Berlin Wall is Germany. And then 1991 was Glasnost and Perestroika, which is inside Russia. But the protests were also around the whole Soviet bloc. So it depends if the King of the South of Russia or the whole Soviet bloc. There's all these different things which I can't my brain can't figure out. But yeah,
Okay.
you're right. If we're going to say repeat of history, we should probably have those details figured out, or at least figure out if they don't match, then, you know,
Okay.
does that make sense? Or okay. So I'm just going to say at the moment, I think Trump is shrunk back to Russia. That was the borders thing again, Manjit. Let me read that. Yeah, there's another. It says in the chat, well, Russia controlled the USSR and then it sunk back to Russia. Okay.
Aaron, you just made the point about 1989 being the Berlin Wall and not being in Russia, but we use that to mark the fall of the King of the South, don't we, or the overthrow of the King of the South in some way. So is it internal because it's an ideological thing that all those countries, including Russians, have rejected communism, and that's the symbol of the Berlin Wall falling down. So it's an internal fall in that sense, that people are no longer accepting the ideology of communism. So, but I don't know what you do with 91 when you say then it's the dismantling of it. Is that the external death, or is that completion of the internal death? It's like, what is, like, if we're going to say deadly wound and death, how we conceptualize that? I was thinking you were going along that line, that it's internal because the ideology has fallen, but it's only externally dismantled. Because isn't that 91 when Gorbachev steps away and they become independent states?
I think I see what you're saying. The other thing is, I'm not even sure what year Glasnost and Perestroika was, exactly what year it started. Was it 1989 or 1990? Gorbachev, 1989. So I don't even know the details of the history well enough. But good thought anyway. Okay. So continue just to shout out, interrupt, I'll carry on anyway. So I think at the moment, if we're on that dot there, then you can see Trump exercising power over Putin through the Ukraine peace talks. That's Trump's peace deal, and he's dictating the terms to everyone. He's telling Ukraine, you can't even be in the talks. By the way, you have to give us 50% of your mineral rights. And also, we're not policing Ukraine in the future. Europe has to do that. And Trump's, I'm going to say, dictating the terms to Putin as well, although he's seems to be being nicer to Putin. It's still Trump's peace deal, and it's Trump that's getting Putin out of a terrible quagmire. And I think there's some face-saving elements to it as well, where he says Putin holds all the cards. He doesn't mean above himself, he means above Ukraine. And maybe Trump will acquiesce to some of Putin's ceasefire demands and things like that. But it's still Trump dictating to Putin. So I'm thinking Ukraine. I'm thinking I'll just say loosely, the end of the Ukraine war, because I know wars end in stages. But loosely speaking, the end of the Ukraine war then would be this external death of the King of the South. Does that make sense? Any thoughts?
Hi, Aaron. Just
Yeah.
a very quick one. And I found it interesting how you described it. I was looking over World War II again, and the alliance between the King of the North and the King of the South that they go into breaks apart where we would line up with 2018 and 2019, the history aside, if you lay World War II over our line. And the point in that World War II history is that they never go back into an alliance after it's broken down. So just echoing what you say is that with the histories that we do have with the King of the North and the King of the South, even though today it may look like the King of the North and the King of the South are in an alliance, what you see is not all there is. Because in those histories, that alliance just never recovers. They're not allies, even though it may look like it today.
That's interesting. 2019, 2021.
I think
Go ahead.
2019 was Operation Barbarossa. I think.
Panium was 1945, wasn't it? 2021, 1945. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And after Operation Barbarossa, when the King of the North goes into the Soviet Union, they just, they're not allies anymore.
1945, yeah. Okay, good point. Thank you for that. Anything else? So if we're going to look at the Ukraine war, I think as far as I know, the movement expert on Ukraine would be Aryan. And he's already put, excuse me, he's already put the peace deal into his structure and his lines, which I won't go through now, but he's already placed the peace deal as the story for the Ukraine war. And what Aryan teaches is that that the National Sunday Law is yet future, and it's going to be, I'll say again, the end of the Ukraine war. But I did ask him exactly which point, because you've got peace deal, then you've got negotiations, various things happen in the build up to the end of the war. And he said he wasn't too sure right now, at least when I asked him a few weeks ago. So I'll just put the end of the Ukraine. So he's got that event also marked as, I'll say, a Sunday law. But what I'm thinking then is perhaps Aryan has actually identified this way mark, the event at this way mark, the worldwide Sunday law, Daniel 12:1. And logically, to me, perhaps you might want to move that to there. Does that make sense? Any thoughts? And then, of course, with your line upon line, you've got this here. You've got, in the words of Daniel 8:9, you've got the South conquered. So I'm going to say South. King is a kingdom. The king of the South conquered here. And that lines up as well. I remember last week I drew some kind of, I drew a line from 1991 as well, but I can't remember the point. Okay, so basically I'm suggesting end of the Ukraine war, Daniel 12:1. Any thoughts? That's basically it.
So you just lined up Aaron South there with Russia at Daniel 12:1, but in the old model we would say Syria or the East at 64 BC was Russia, and that's why we thought the King of the South has to be dealt with first before the King of the North can enter the glorious land. So that's something I'm still not clear on, this whole order of events, because it's 3 territories, and we used to say take down first of all the South, King of the South, which is Russia, then the glorious land, and then Egypt, which we said is the rest of the world. And you're marking the rest of the world at Daniel 12:1, which we would have said in the past was Egypt, but you've just called it South as in Russia. So it feels like mixing the terms when you do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, go on.
That's something I still struggle with explaining.
Yeah.
Someone else asked me that, I think it was Brazil, and I said, I've had it explained to me, so I know there is an answer, but you know me, I didn't get it. But I have confidence that there is an answer. The answer, which it's a bit of a different question, because you're saying the East or Syria was identified as Russia in the past.
Yeah.
LDGF model. I forgot about that, even though it's staring me in the face. I didn't think of that until you just said it.
And then we'd go to the Daniel 11, 40 to 45, and we'd say the terms are King of the South, Glorious Land, and Egypt, and we'd make application of them. So we'd say that the King of the North first has to deal with the King of the South before it can enter the Glorious Land. And of course, what we're saying now is it's kind of running concurrently because we understand more about Russia not being dead, really. And it's got this wound now, so it's kind of dying, but it's not dead until we get to Egypt there, or we get to that Daniel 12:1. And then because it is part of the world, it's going to die there, really. So it's still running concurrently, it seems, with the Glorious Land, with entering the Glorious Land. So it's not first and second in that narrative, it's progressive and combining or concurrent. And that's something I still haven't got to grips with, I don't think, how that works.
Yeah, I could never figure that out. That's another good thing that we should try and figure out. I feel like just answering with a clever little catchphrase. The simple is now complex.
Okay,
Just
and I think Elder Terry started to address it by saying in that history, it's not, maybe it wasn't Elder Terry, maybe it was someone else, maybe it was Curtis actually, was it you, Curtis? Is that it's not that straightforward, that this 64, 63, 31, there's a lot going on in there, that Rome is interacting all the time
That's
with
also true.
the South, and it's not dealt with completely until 31, but there's a lot of things going on in that history that it's not that straightforward. That they take down one and then they take down the next one and then they go to the next one. So they've got interaction with Egypt way back, even in that 64, 63 history. So that's not, so it is combined in a sense. It's not that straight, like you say, simple and complex. It's not that straightforward that they take down one power and then they go to the next one. And it's all done and dusted.
It's a good point, really good point. I don't know. I'll leave that to you to figure out. That's your homework. You've got until next week.
I got lost. Could I just clarify? Is the conversation about? Because I was going to ask it at the beginning, but I didn't want to. 64 BC. It says Eastern Syria. That's got nothing to do with the King of the South. Is that the question? In a nutshell.
Emma, you may as well.
Well, my question was: we used to say that when the King of the North takes down the East, South, and Pleasant Land, we'd make application that East there is Russia in that story. And then we'd bring it to Daniel 11, 40 to 45, and we'd say, okay, here it's called King of the South. So it's got a different terminology. And we'd say that in that model, Egypt is the world in the Daniel 11 model. And that we wouldn't say South there was King of the South. 31 BC, we wouldn't say that South there is, we wouldn't say that South there is Russia or USSR in the 31 BC model. And it's just that Aaron just said, we see South, so that fits, that the death of the King of the South is going to be at this worldwide Sunday law. It seemed to me to be mixing the terms.
We may not have said it, but if you overlay Daniel 2 on top of that, 31 BC has to be the South. Because that's Greece. And for Rome, pagan Rome to rule supremely, it has to destroy Greece. And Greece doesn't get destroyed in 64 or 63. It's in fact 63 is the distraction. 63 isn't even a story. It's only 64 and 31 if you want to use those particular waymarks. There are earlier ones, but it's only at 31 BC that Greece is finally taken down, and Greece is the King of the South, because the King of the North part of it was dealt with earlier. So we already knew that. We've known that for a long time. That's not new.
So what would you say East was then? Eastern Syria, was that controlled by Greece as well?
For sure.
So it's the same.
Wherever East or Syria is, because you're asking about the 31 BC. The 31 BC historically is Egypt, and above Egypt it's Greece, and prophetically Greece is the King of the South. We know it's already the King of the North, but it lost its titleship for King of the North way before 64. We know that. That's when, if I recall, we used to teach, that's when pagan Rome takes Babylon, I think. could be something else. But it becomes, Rome has become the king of the north before 64. And once it does that,
168, I think. God.
yeah, whatever the number is,
Mm.
half of Greece has been dealt with, the north bit, the Seleucid Empire, and now all needs to be left with is the Ptolemaic Empire, which is 31. So we know, even if we didn't have a conscious understanding of it, that 31 BC was always the final demise of Greece, and therefore it had to have been the final demise of the king of the south. Whatever we believed Daniel 11:40 to 45 was teaching.
Okay, so if you make that,
Because that goes back to Ignatius's question.
in 31, if you make that king of the south, what's 64 then?
Whatever it is, it is.
Yeah, no, if I'm trying to make it as, I guess just trying to parallel it to Daniel 11:40 to 45, and it's not easy to do that if you make that king of the south. I suppose it is in a way, then you'd have to make east.
Because we already knew that before. We already knew 64 was east, and therefore we would have said Russia is east of the glorious land today. That's
Yeah,
how we used to, skip around that.
that was the logic, yeah.
Oh
Because
yeah.
you're trying to make those three powers the same
Yeah,
three powers as Daniel 11.
so we were aware of that.
Yeah. Because that fits the three powers. You're going to say that south there is Egypt. Sorry, Egypt is the same as the one in Daniel 11:40 to 45. Pleasant lands, glorious land, and east is Russia, is king of the south. But is
In
that
that
wrong?
story,
Wrong?
in that story, historically,
Mm,
whatever the east is, whatever Syria is, that's Greece. And whatever the pleasant land is, that's Greece. And whatever Egypt is, it's Greece. These are territories that are owned by Greece.
Yeah, because it has to take them down to control.
We should really skip the pleasant land because that's just collateral damage. Rome is taking territory of Greece. And so in that story, there's only two powers fighting, Greece and Rome.
Mhm.
But when we looked at it in our history, we would say it's Russia, America, and then the world. We turn it into three entities, knowing full well that in the past, historically, it wasn't. And as I said, we skipped around that by just saying, oh, we know the East is the same entity. It's the power of brass. But for us, we'll make it entity number one, and then you get 1, 2, 3. But in those history, there's only 2 if you take out the glorious land in that history. It's only King of North King. It's only Rome versus Greece. And so we used to take the play on words so that it was east in that story. And then we used to say, well, Russia was east of, or Soviet Union was east of America. So we used to sort of just skirt around that issue.
Yeah, okay.
You don't sound happy.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but you don't sound happy about what I'm saying.
So we're still going to, if we could make that application now of 31 BC, we're going to say that is in that story, Egypt is king of the south,
in which story?
Is Russia. If we make application of that story, which is what Aaron just did.
Which story?
Our story, Daniel 12:1, worldwide Sunday law. If we
Daniel 12:1, Daniel in verse 42. It's not 12:1, it's verse 42. It's not 12:1. Verse 42, the world is the world. Egypt is the world. It's not Russia.
Yeah, so in this story, 31 BC, we're going to make that, he's dropping that down underneath to make the application by saying that the death of the king of the south there is Russia. Just like the south was taken in 31 BC.
The death of the king of the south
is what fulfills that 31 BC.
31 BC is the death of the king of the south. Aaron's not saying that. That's historical fact or prophetic historical fact. You agree with that?
Yeah.
And then the second part?
So we're going to make that before it would have been, that means the whole world has been taken because we're making that application that it's Egypt, but he's making the application that it's the death of the king of the south, Russia.
I can't answer for him. I wouldn't.
Oh, okay.
In Daniel 12:1, Egypt is still the world.
Yeah, I think that was my point.
What, that it's not the world, or you're asking that it is, or if it's
No,
changed?
there is, and based on the logic that above that we've got Egypt there being taken down in 31 BC, and yet he made it king of the south. He said it was Russia. That's why I was like, okay, so is that what we're making application, that south there is Russia now? And I see
Which south? There is no south. There is no south in 12 in. He's
31.
put 12:1 there, but it's 1142. 1142. There is no south. It's called Egypt
Yeah,
for a reason, because in verse 40 it says south.
yeah. So it's different.
What's different?
The south of Egypt is different in that from 40 to 42.
Sure. But when you go to pagan Rome, they're not different. They're the same entity, Greece. But they're different regions of Greece.
Yeah. So I think my question, well, go on, never mind. I'm not sure what the question was now. I think it's the fact that he applied that south there to Russia, the death of Russia. Can we use that 31 BC to say that Russia's going to die because it's south at Daniel 12:1, because that's the last kind of, but you're saying it's still Egypt, and I think that's what I was saying, it's still Egypt. So from Daniel 11:42, so why are we going to make that south there? We're going to apply it as well to the death of the king of the south, to the death of Russia. We're making it a double thing because we can't see that in the model you described.
What's a double thing?
It's two applications, two things going on at once. There's one thing is Egypt.
It's two separate things happening at the same time, if that's what you mean.
Yes, and he's making that application from that 31 BC.
What about if I said it this way? Greece is the world.
Mm-hmm.
You happy with that?
In that story in the top line, yeah.
In Daniel 2, Greece is the world.
Daniel 2, okay.
It says it in the verses. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It says it's the only power that's
39,
identified as the world.
Yeah.
So then there's another power that's going to come, and it's going to take Greece, which means it's going to take over the world.
Mm-hmm.
The first part of the world it takes over is in 1989.
Yeah.
The second part of the world it takes over is 2024.
Yeah.
And then in the next verse, it's taken from 24 to whenever verse 42 is, it's now taken the whole world.
Yeah, and that's what we used to say.
So at that level,
that's one story.
that is the story. It's not one story. That's the story. It's the takeover by the fourth kingdom of the world as it repeats.
Yeah.
And what we can get hung up on is when we deal with individual territories of the world, how and when those are taken down. Because if you want to talk about Russia or the Soviet Union, you'll see it at every single waymark. You see it at 1989, 2024, and 12:1. That's shown there. It's taken all that time to just deal with one of the countries. Literally.
Yeah, and that's the complexity. I think the old model said it's going to have dealt with that country by July 18th, by 2024.
One of the old models said it was going to, but, but another old model was staring us in the face saying it's not going to.
Yeah, because it's still part of Greece and it's still dealing with, Okay.
And we can't have one model trump another one.
What do you mean trump another one? Replace?
Beat.
But I thought we were just saying there are two things going on there. It's not two.
No, I mean, you can't have the pagan Rome line
Mm.
and the Daniel 11 line fighting against one another and have one of them beat the other one.
No, okay, yeah.
They both have to work
So we
if they're
reconcile.
both correct.
Yeah.
I'm done. Sorry. Took too long.
So I have a question. If 1989, we have the, as you call it, the wound, sequentially, then the King of the North can't take the glorious land until the King of the South is dead. So we're saying in our new model that Republican Party's taken over the glorious land. And we're saying Sunday law is July 18, yet King of the South is still alive. Are we saying sequentially it doesn't have to do that? Or are we saying by July 18, the King of the South had to be there, but it isn't? Anyway, over
No
to you.
idea. I'm not sure I even understand the question at this stage. Hold on.
Oh, sorry, Aaron. I put it in the chat box anyway.
Over to you, Emma, Elder Parminder. Elder Emma?
What was the question?
Say it again, actually.
Okay, so when we take the first line, pagan Rome, it's sequential, isn't it? When it takes the east, takes the pleasant land, and then takes Egypt, right? It happens sequentially. And then we used to teach that, okay, 1989, King of the South is taken. And so the next event was the glorious land to be taken. But then we said, oh no, King of the South hasn't been killed yet. So sequentially, even in our time, should not the King of the South be killed first before the King of the North can take the glorious land? I'm just saying, are we no longer saying it's a sequential thing?
That's my question. That was my question. That we
Oh,
just.
okay. Yeah, it was a good question.
You didn't get the answer though.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, February is before July.
February 24. What happened in February 24?
Oh,
For now, Navalny. Okay.
Entirely killed Russia.
Can you do that though? Because it's the same waymark.
I was being flippant. Sorry, shouldn't be
Well,
flippant in a serious study.
Oh, the Paminda, come on.
Oh,
Because if we're saying King of the South has to be killed first, then have we got July 18 wrong?
don't
Oh,
put me on
sorry. I'm keeping quiet now.
That's,
Sorry.
that's why hence all this discussion to get these lines to line
No,
up.
I know. It's like it's
Oh, good.
and I know you for space you took the papal line out, but that was done sequentially, wasn't it? When the three territories were plucked up by the papacy, it was sequential. So either we do away with sequential, or we just need to kind of refine it a bit more. Sorry, I didn't mean to put spanner there.
Just repeat
Yeah.
what Elder Perminder was saying. I think that there's a complexity, as Erin says, the simple to the complex, that yes, we thought it was three sequential territories, and in one way it is, but at the top line, it's the east and south there are the same entity. So that there's this thing that it's Greece still, and he has to deal with all this. So there is that complexity there, that it's not that straightforward that you just go 1, 2, 3, even though that's how we've conceptualized it. And so that we've got to take that into account when we say this. Actually, what does it look like for Russia to be taken down anyway? But if does Russia have to be dealt with? And in fact, Russia probably isn't going to be dealt with until the whole world is dealt with, because it's still a power, but it's lost some kind of force. And I think, but it seems to be happening concurrently at the same time as the glorious land coming down. So I don't think it is. It feels to me it's not sequential like we thought it was, or it's not as simple as saying it's just 1, 2, 3.
Magic, can I just ask a question? You say 1-2 sequential. Are you saying that if I say just Russia, not Soviet, is you saying Russia has to come down before the Sunday law? Is that what you say? It has to be like 1, 2, 3 in that kind of like sequential step. Is that your concern?
Yes. Yeah.
And what's that based upon?
History,
Which history?
pagan and papal, when it takes the 3 territories. It was done sequentially.
That's it. That's your only argument.
Sure, but you got
Because
to go on.
because on the line that's we got in front of us, it's not a problem on that line. Pagan Rome. There's no
Only
sequential. There's
well,
no
only
sequentialness of that, is there?
well, there was because okay, you're saying Greece is Greece, but the top part of Greece was taken, and then in 31 BC the bottom part of Greece is taken.
Okay.
So it's still sequential. And although you say it's Greece, it was different kingdoms of Greece, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, but at the prophetic level, it's Greece. Where would you think the King of the South has to be dealt with? At 1989, when it's you say sequential.
No, because we know we always adjusted that to say 1989 was the beginning. It was only a strike. So I think even by I don't know 2018 2019 we hadn't concluded that the King of the South had been killed, and that's why we'd always said go on.
We'd concluded that it hadn't been killed. I'm sure.
No, I agree. Yeah. I'm saying by when Jeff was still on the scene, the King of the South hadn't been dealt with yet. So
What I think the point that had been made was that it had been dealt with in 1989, but if you want to take it historically, it hadn't been dealt with properly.
yes, yeah.
And there was a prophetic argument for that.
Yes. So all I'm saying then is then we're in July 18, 2024, and the King of the South still hasn't been taken care of.
And you're only basing that on 3 horns.
And pagan, yes, the country, yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but only 3 horns. That's
sure.
Because
okay.
the pagan Rome one isn't. I don't think is a.
Yeah, but we always used to say, you take history 1, history 2, and then you can make application history 3, and you have application combined from history 1, history 2. So we can't ignore history 2. That's what I'm saying.
No one's ignoring it. It depends what you want to draw out from that.
But no, I'm just raising the question. I'm not saying I'm just saying I'm putting it out there that do we have an explanation for that? Maybe it's a good time for a break. I don't know.
Okay, I'll stop speaking.
No, I think it needs to be thrashed out, isn't it? Because when we present these things, it needs to be watertight. And it's only now I'm thinking, it doesn't look watertight to me, but I'm saying, and as Aaron has pointed out a couple of times, and in the past, things which look a bit blurry, get ironed out or come out in the wash. I think we need an answer there. I don't think we can just brush it off.
Good.
What's good?
Good dialogue. I
Oh,
followed about half of it. I'm going to have to rewatch it and rewatch it and rewatch it.
okay.
I mean, I understand your point, and
Yeah.
I think
I don't have an answer. I don't have all the answer. I'm just saying. I'm just looking at it now, proper, and thinking, okay, these thoughts are just coming to me.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't know the history at all. I don't know it well at all. What was going on with Syria all the way through, or was it just completely conquered and done and dusted? I don't know. So. Okay, someone said it's, oh yeah, good time for a break. Any last thoughts before we close? Any questions? And then how much time should we have?
We're gonna have 15 minutes, shall we?
Okay. Any last thoughts? You want to say a prayer? Anyway, you can also ask in the next session. So let's close in prayer. Almighty God in heaven, we thank you again for Good Friends and for this good message and this movement. And we just pray that you'll help us to be faithful even unto the end. In Jesus' name, amen.